Spirit's newborn body convulsed with a disease no veterinarian could diagnose, his copper coat slick with fever as death approached. 28-year-old Maple shattered decades of solitude by forcing her aging body between the foal and death, her empty udder inexplicably filling with milk as she stood guard day and night. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Dawn broke over Silver Creek Ranch, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The morning air carried a crisp chill, filled with the sweet scent of fresh hay and damp earth. Inside the main stable, Maple, an aging mare with a silvery white coat that had once been the color of chestnuts, raised her head. Her ears perked forward as she heard the sound that had been disturbing her sleep for the past several nights. The labored breathing of Spirit, the newborn foal who had arrived just 1 week ago. Maple was 28 years old, ancient by horse standards. Her joints ached with arthritis, and her once proud gait had slowed to a careful shuffle. The ranch owners had retired her from riding years ago, allowing her to live out her days in peace. Most of the time she kept to herself, preferring the quiet corner of the pasture where the sun warmed her aging bones. The younger horses respected her space, sensing perhaps that she had earned her solitude after years of service. But something about Spirit had drawn her attention from the moment he was born. Perhaps it was the way his chestnut coat gleamed like burnished copper in the sunlight, reminding her of her own youth. Or maybe it was the unmistakable spark of life in his eyes, a determination that seemed at odds with his frail body. Emma Parker, the ranch owner's daughter, entered the stable carrying a bucket of fresh water. At 19, she had grown up on this ranch, watching horses being born, raised, and sometimes passing away. But Spirit's case troubled her deeply. She noticed Maple standing vigilantly near Spirit's stall, as she had been doing consistently for days. "Hey there, old girl," Emma said softly, setting down the bucket to stroke Maple's neck. "Still watching over our little patient, aren't you?" Maple's wise brown eyes seemed to hold a depth of understanding that sometimes made Emma forget she was talking to a horse. The mare had been part of Emma's life for as long as she could remember. Her father had bought Maple when Emma was just a baby, and some of her earliest memories were of riding on the gentle mare's back, her tiny hands clutching the silky mane while her father led them around the paddock. Emma knelt beside Spirit, who lay trembling in the fresh straw. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and his eyes, though bright, held a glassy quality that worried her. She ran her hand gently along his side, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. The fever had not broken despite the veterinarian's treatments. "Dr. Rodriguez is coming back today," she told both horses, though her words were more for her own comfort. "He'll know what to do." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her heart. Dr. Rodriguez had already visited 3 times, administering antibiotics, taking blood samples, and checking Spirit's vital signs. Each time he left with a deeper furrow in his brow. "I've never seen anything quite like this," he had admitted yesterday. "The blood work isn't showing any common infections. We might need to consider more specialized testing." Emma's father, James Parker, a weathered man with sun-creased skin and calloused hands, had simply nodded. "Whatever it takes, Doc. This little guy deserves a fighting chance." Spirit was the son of Thunderbolt, their prize stallion, and Aurora, a mare they had recently acquired. The foal's birth had been cause for celebration, a perfect delivery with no complications. For the first 2 days, Spirit had seemed healthy, nursing well and even taking a few wobbly steps around the stall under his mother's watchful eye. Then, on the 3rd morning, Emma had found him lying on his side, his little body shivering, despite the warm spring air. Aurora had seemed distressed, pacing the stall and nudging her foal, trying to get him to stand. But Spirit could barely lift his head. What had been most surprising was Maple's reaction. The old mare, who typically avoided the commotion of the main stable, had abandoned her peaceful corner of the pasture and taken up position near Spirit's stall. When Emma had opened the stall door to check on the foal, Maple had slipped inside before anyone could stop her. Emma had been prepared to lead the old mare out, fearing she might accidentally step on the weak foal. But something in Maple's demeanor had stopped her. The ancient horse had approached Spirit with a gentleness that seemed almost maternal, softly nickering as she lowered her head to nuzzle the foal. Then, to everyone's amazement, she had carefully positioned herself beside him, her body creating a protective barrier between the foal and the world. Aurora, who might have been expected to react defensively to another horse approaching her baby, had simply watched, as if understanding that Maple offered something she could not. Since that moment, Maple had scarcely left Spirit's side. She ate only when food was brought to her and rested standing up, a skill horses had perfected over millennia of evolution. The ranch hands had begun calling her the nurse, a title that seemed to amuse Emma's father. "That old girl's seen more of life than most of us," he had commented, watching Maple standing guard. "Maybe she knows something we don't." Now, as Emma prepared for the veterinarian's visit, she found herself hoping her father was right. Perhaps Maple's ancient wisdom extended to healing as well. The mare certainly seemed to believe she could help, and in the absence of answers from modern medicine, Emma was willing to place some faith in the instincts of an animal who had been part of their family for nearly 3 decades. Dr. Rodriguez arrived just before noon, his truck kicking up dust as it rolled down the long driveway. Emma met him at the stable entrance, her face tight with worry. "No improvement?" he asked, though the answer was written in her expression. "His fever's still high and he's barely eating," Emma replied, leading him to Spirit's stall. "Maple hasn't left his side." The veterinarian nodded, having witnessed the old mare's devotion during his previous visits. He approached the stall slowly, speaking softly to both horses before entering. Maple shifted slightly to allow him access to Spirit, but maintained her protective stance. Dr. Rodriguez conducted his examination with practiced efficiency, his hands gentle but thorough as they moved over the foal's trembling body. Emma watched his face, searching for any sign of hope, but his expression remained professionally neutral. After completing his exam, the veterinarian straightened and stepped out of the stall, gesturing for Emma to follow him outside where they could speak privately. "I've sent his blood work to a specialist at the university," he said. "But I'll be honest, Emma, I'm concerned. His condition is deteriorating, and without knowing what we're fighting..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Emma understood the implications all too well. Without a diagnosis, treatment was a shot in the dark, and time was running out for the little foal whose will to live seemed to be the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. "What about Maple?" Emma asked suddenly. "Is it good for her to stay with him like that? She's hardly eating or sleeping." Dr. Rodriguez glanced back at the stall, where the old mare stood vigil over the sick foal. A thoughtful expression crossed his face. "You know, in all my years of practice, I've seen some remarkable things. Animals have instincts we barely understand. If Maple wants to stay with him..." He shrugged. "I wouldn't separate them. She's not hurting him, and who knows? Maybe her presence is giving him strength." As they walked back to the stall, Emma noticed something she hadn't seen before. Spirit, though still weak, had shifted his position slightly so that his small body was pressed against Maple's foreleg, as if drawing comfort from her presence. The old mare stood absolutely still, allowing the foal to use her for support. In that moment, watching the silver mare protecting the copper foal, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Whatever mysterious illness plagued Spirit, he wasn't facing it alone. And sometimes, she thought, that made all the difference in the world. As twilight descended over Silver Creek Ranch, Emma completed her evening chores with mechanical efficiency, her mind never straying far from Spirit's condition. The day had brought no answers, only more questions. Dr. Rodriguez had left additional medication, a stronger antibiotic and anti-inflammatory drugs, but his expression had conveyed more worry than hope. Emma's father found her sitting on an overturned bucket outside Spirit's stall, watching through the slats as Maple continued her silent vigil over the foal. "You should get some rest," James said, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You've been out here since dawn." Emma shook her head. "I can't leave them, Dad. What if something happens during the night?" James sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of his daughter's jaw, an expression he'd seen in the mirror often enough. "At least come in for dinner. Sarah's made your favorite stew." Sarah, James's second wife and Emma's stepmother of 8 years, had become the heart of their home after Emma's mother passed away from cancer when Emma was 10. "I'll bring a plate out here," Emma replied, her gaze still fixed on the 2 horses. James knew better than to argue. Emma had inherited his own fierce loyalty to the animals in their care. Instead, he settled beside her on another bucket, following her gaze into the stall. "Remarkable, isn't it?" he said after a while. "What's that?" "Maple. Never showed much interest in foals before, not even when she had her own." Emma turned to her father in surprise. "Maple had a foal? I don't remember that." James nodded, his weathered face softening with memory. "Long before you were born, your mother and I had just bought this place. Maple was our second horse, a gorgeous chestnut mare back then, not much older than Spirit's mother is now." "What happened to her foal?" Emma asked, though something in her father's tone suggested she already knew the answer. "He didn't make it," James said quietly. "Some kind of congenital heart defect. The vet said there was nothing we could have done." Maple seemed to understand. She didn't search for him like some mares do. But after that, she kept her distance from the other foals born on the ranch, almost like she didn't want to get attached. Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she looked back at the old mare, standing protectively over Spirit. Until now, her father agreed. They sat in silence for a few more minutes before James rose with a groan, his knees protesting the movement. "I'll bring you that stew and a thermos of coffee. Looks like it's going to be a long night." After her father left, Emma entered the stall, moving slowly to avoid startling either horse. Spirit lay curled against Maple's forelegs, his breathing still labored but perhaps a touch less desperate than earlier. Emma knelt beside him, gently checking his temperature with the back of her hand against his neck. Still too warm, but not the raging fever of the morning. "What do you see in him, old girl?" Emma murmured to Maple, who watched her with those knowing eyes. "What makes this one special to you?" Maple lowered her head until her muzzle nearly touched Spirit's, blowing softly through her nostrils. The gesture was so tender that Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. Whatever bond had formed between these 2 unlikely companions, it transcended explanation. Around midnight, Emma was jolted from a light doze by the sound of Spirit struggling to rise. The foal's legs trembled violently as he attempted to get his feet under him, only to collapse back into the straw with a weak whimper. "Easy, buddy," Emma soothed, moving quickly to his side. But before she could reach him, Maple had already shifted position, lowering herself with surprising grace until she was lying beside Spirit, her body curved protectively around his. The foal immediately seemed to calm, pressing against the warmth of the older horse. Emma watched in amazement as Maple began to groom Spirit, her teeth gently nibbling along his neck and back in the way mother horses cared for their young. The simple action appeared to comfort the foal, his trembling subsiding as Maple continued her ministrations. "Well, I'll be," came her father's voice from the stall door. He stood there holding a fresh thermos of coffee, his expression a mixture of surprise and something like reverence. "In 30 years of raising horses, I've never seen anything quite like this." Emma accepted the thermos gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around its warmth. "Do you think she knows something we don't? About what's wrong with him?" James shook his head slowly. "I don't know about that, but she clearly knows something about what he needs." As the night deepened, Emma dozed intermittently, waking each time to check on Spirit. The foal's condition remained precarious, but she noticed something remarkable. Whenever his breathing became more labored or he seemed distressed, Maple would shift position slightly or nicker softly, and he would settle once more. Toward dawn, Emma was startled awake by the sound of tires on gravel. Bleary-eyed, she stepped out of the stable to see Dr. Rodriguez's truck pulling up, far earlier than his scheduled visit. "I was on my way to an emergency call at the Hendersons' place," he explained as he gathered his equipment. "Thought I'd stop and check on our little patient first." His kind eyes took in Emma's disheveled appearance. "You've been here all night?" Emma nodded, leading him to the stall where, to their surprise, both Maple and Spirit were now standing. The foal's legs still trembled, but the fact that he was upright at all seemed miraculous given his condition the previous day. Dr. Rodriguez conducted his examination with raised eyebrows. "His temperature's down," he noted. "Not normal yet, but better, and his heart rate has stabilized somewhat." "Does that mean he's improving?" Emma asked, hardly daring to hope. The veterinarian's expression remained cautious. "It's a good sign, but I wouldn't call it a recovery yet. We still don't know what we're dealing with." He glanced at Maple, who hadn't moved from Spirit's side. "Though I'm starting to think your senior citizen here might be the best medicine he's getting." Before leaving, Dr. Rodriguez drew another blood sample and promised to call as soon as he heard anything from the specialist. As his truck disappeared down the driveway, Sarah appeared from the house carrying a basket with breakfast and fresh coffee. "Your father said you'd be needing this," she said, setting it down on a hay bale. Her gaze softened as she looked into the stall. "James told me about Maple's foal. Do you think that's why she's so attached to Spirit?" Emma accepted a steaming mug of coffee. "Maybe. Or maybe she just sees something in him worth fighting for." Sarah smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind Emma's ear in a motherly gesture. "Like someone else I know." As they shared breakfast outside the stall, Emma found herself studying Maple with new understanding. The old mare had known loss and had chosen isolation afterward, keeping herself separate from the painful attachments that might hurt her again. Until Spirit. Something about this struggling foal had broken through her carefully maintained distance. The morning sun spilled through the stable windows, illuminating the silver mare and chestnut foal in a golden glow. Spirit had managed a few wobbly steps with Maple hovering beside him, ready to provide support if his legs gave way. It wasn't recovery, not yet, but it was something like hope, fragile and precious. And for now, Emma decided, that would have to be enough. By mid-morning, news of Spirit's slight improvement had spread throughout the ranch. The stable hands paused at the stall door during their chores, watching with quiet amazement as the elderly mare continued her unwavering vigil. Miguel, who had worked at Silver Creek for over 15 years, crossed himself and murmured something about miracles in Spanish before continuing with his work. Emma had finally been persuaded to return to the house for a shower and proper rest, but only after extracting a promise from everyone to alert her immediately if Spirit's condition changed. As the warm water washed away the stable dust and fatigue, she found herself thinking about what her father had shared regarding Maple's past. The mare's history of loss gave her devotion to Spirit a poignancy that brought tears to Emma's eyes. Animals, she reflected, carried their histories in ways humans couldn't always see, their emotional lives running deeper than many people cared to acknowledge. When Emma returned to the stable an hour later, refreshed but still weary, she found Dr. Rodriguez's truck parked outside once again. Her heart leaped into her throat as she hurried inside, fearing the worst. Instead, She found the veterinarian standing at the stall door with her father, both men watching as Spirit nursed from a bottle held by Sarah. "He's eating," Emma breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Dr. Rodriguez turned, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Not much, but yes, it's a good sign. We're supplementing with this special formula since he doesn't have the strength to nurse properly from his mother yet." "What about his illness?" Emma asked. "Did you hear from the specialist?" The veterinarian nodded, his face growing more serious. "Dr. Patel at the university called this morning. The blood work shows markers for an unusual type of equine immune disorder. It's rare, especially in foals this young." James ran a hand through his graying hair. "What does that mean for his chances?" "It's not great news," Dr. Rodriguez admitted. "But it's not a death sentence either. The treatment is complex, a combination of immune suppressants and targeted antibiotics. The challenge will be keeping him strong enough to fight while we suppress the overactive immune response that's attacking his system." Emma moved closer to the stall, watching as Spirit finished the small amount of formula and rested his head against Sarah's knee. Maple stood nearby, her watchful gaze never leaving the foal. "Can we start the treatment today?" Emma asked. Dr. Rodriguez hefted his medical bag. "Already brought everything we need. But I should warn you, the next few days will be critical. The medications have side effects. He may seem worse before he gets better." "But he has a chance?" Emma pressed. The veterinarian's eyes softened as he looked at the determined young woman. "Yes, he has a chance." The treatment began immediately. Dr. Rodriguez administered the first injections while explaining the schedule of medications to Emma and her father. Spirit barely reacted to the needle, too weak to protest. Throughout the procedure, Maple maintained her position, occasionally lowering her head to nuzzle the foal's neck when he seemed distressed. "I've never seen such devotion from a horse that's not the mother," Dr. Rodriguez commented as he packed up his supplies. "Especially not from one her age." "She lost a foal of her own once," Emma said quietly. "Dad thinks that might have something to do with it." The veterinarian nodded thoughtfully. "Animals grieve, sometimes for years. Perhaps she sees this as a second chance." As predicted, the medications took a toll on Spirit's already fragile system. By evening, the foal was shivering despite the warm blanket Emma had draped over him, his small body racked with tremors that seemed to come in waves. Maple's behavior became even more protective, positioning herself so that Spirit could lean against her for support. Aurora, Spirit's mother, had been moved to an adjacent stall after it became clear that Maple had assumed the primary caregiving role. The young mare still called to her foal occasionally, but seemed to accept the unusual arrangement, perhaps recognizing that her baby was receiving care she couldn't provide. As night fell, Emma prepared for another vigil. She had created a makeshift bed of straw and blankets in the corner of the stall, determined not to leave the foal during this critical period. Her father brought out a camping lantern and a thermos of hot soup. "Sarah's worried about you," he said, settling the items beside her bed. "Says you're going to make yourself sick." Emma managed a tired smile. "Tell her I'm fine, I just need to be here." James studied his daughter's face, recognizing the same stubborn determination he'd seen in her mother years ago. "You get that from Caroline, you know. That need to fix everything, to save everyone. Is that a bad thing?" Emma asked, suddenly wondering if she was being foolish, investing so much of herself in a foal that might not survive. Her father's expression softened. "No, it's what makes you special, Em. Just remember to take care of yourself too." After he left, Emma sat beside Spirit, gently stroking his neck as he dozed fitfully. Maple remained standing, her legs locked in the peculiar way that allowed horses to sleep upright. The mare's eyes would close for brief periods, but any sound from Spirit would immediately bring her to full alertness. Around midnight, Spirit's condition worsened dramatically. His breathing became labored, each inhalation a visible struggle that lifted his ribcage in an exaggerated motion. Emma, who had been dozing lightly, was awakened by Maple's urgent nickering. "Spirit?" Emma knelt beside the foal, her heart pounding with fear. His eyes were glazed, his small body rigid with pain. "No, no, no, come on, buddy, stay with me." She fumbled for her phone, ready to call Dr. Rodriguez, when Maple did something unexpected. The old mare carefully lowered herself to the ground, a difficult maneuver for an arthritic horse, until she was lying beside Spirit. Then, with gentle movements, she nudged the foal until he was pressed against her chest, his head resting near her heart. Emma watched, transfixed, as Spirit's desperate breathing gradually began to synchronize with Maple's slower, steadier rhythm. The foal's eyes, which had been wide with panic, started to relax, his lids drooping as the sound of Maple's heartbeat seemed to soothe him. For hours they remained that way, the ancient mare and the newborn foal, connected by something Emma couldn't fully understand but recognized as profound. She put her phone away, somehow knowing that this night would not be Spirit's last. As dawn approached, Emma was startled by a soft touch on her shoulder. She turned to find Sarah standing there, a mug of coffee in her outstretched hand. "Your father called Dr. Rodriguez," Sarah whispered. "He's on his way." Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. "I thought we were going to lose him last night," she admitted, her voice catching. "But then Maple, she just knew what to do." Sarah's gaze traveled to where the two horses lay together, Spirit's breathing now deeper and more regular than it had been in days. "Some creatures have wisdom we can't explain," she said softly. "Maybe we're not meant to understand it. Just be grateful for it." As the first light of morning filtered through the stable windows, illuminating the silver mare and the copper foal in its gentle glow, Emma felt something she hadn't dared to feel before. Not just hope, but conviction. Whatever battle Spirit was fighting, he wasn't fighting alone, and sometimes that made all the difference. Dr. Rodriguez arrived just as the ranch was coming to life, the daily rhythm of chores beginning as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Emma met him at the stable entrance, the dark circles under her eyes testament to another night of interrupted sleep. "He had a bad episode around midnight," she explained, leading the veterinarian to Spirit's stall. "I thought we were going to lose him, but then..." She gestured to where Maple still lay beside the foal, her large body curled protectively around his small one. Dr. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose as he took in the scene. "She lay down with him?" Emma nodded. "It was the strangest thing. He couldn't breathe properly, and she just knew what to do. She got down beside him, and somehow his breathing started to match hers." The veterinarian shook his head in wonder as he entered the stall, kneeling carefully beside the pair. Maple raised her head, watching him with alert eyes, but making no move to rise or interfere as he began his examination of Spirit. After several minutes, Dr. Rodriguez sat back on his heels. "His respiratory rate is much better than I would have expected given what you described. And his temperature has dropped again." He turned to look at Maple with newfound respect. "I wouldn't have prescribed elderly horse therapy as a treatment, but I can't argue with the results." Emma smiled tiredly. "Do you think he's turning a corner?" "It's too soon to say for certain," Dr. Rodriguez cautioned, preparing another injection of medication. "The immune disorder he has is unpredictable, but he's responding better than I anticipated to the treatment. That's something to be grateful for." As he administered the injection, Spirit flinched slightly, but remained surprisingly calm. Maple lowered her head again, touching her muzzle to the foal's neck in what appeared to be a gesture of reassurance. "I've been thinking about what you said, about Maple losing a foal," Dr. Rodriguez said as he worked. Did your father ever mention what the foal looked like? Emma frowned, trying to recall the brief conversation. I don't think so. Why? The veterinarian gestured toward Spirit. That chestnut coloring is distinctive. And you mentioned Maple was a chestnut before her coat silvered with age. I wonder if Spirit reminds her of her own foal. The possibility hadn't occurred to Emma, but it made a certain sense. You think she sees her baby when she looks at him? Dr. Rodriguez finished the injection and stood up, his knees cracking slightly. Horses have excellent memory, especially for visual details, and the emotional bond between a mare and her foal is one of the strongest in nature. He glanced at Maple with a thoughtful expression. It's just a theory, but it might explain her extraordinary attachment. After the veterinarian left, promising to return that evening, Emma found herself studying Maple with new curiosity. The mare had finally risen, though she remained close to Spirit's side as the foal attempted to stand on wobbly legs. Each time he stumbled, Maple would position herself to catch his weight against her flank, preventing him from falling completely. Emma's father arrived with a fresh bale of straw and stopped to watch the pair. He's standing, he noted, his tone conveying cautious optimism. With help, Emma replied. Dad, did you ever have any pictures of Maple's foal, the one that died? James looked surprised by the question. Might be some in the old albums. Your mother was always taking photos of the horses. Why do you ask? Emma explained Dr. Rodriguez's theory about why Maple had bonded so strongly with Spirit. Her father listened, his expression thoughtful. Could be, he agreed. Her foal was a colt, chestnut with a white blaze, not unlike Spirit. I remember your mother saying he had old eyes, like he'd been here before. He smiled at the memory. She was always seeing things like that, Carolyn was. What was his name? Emma asked. Phoenix, James replied. Your mother named him. Said he had fire in his eyes. The name sent a shiver down Emma's spine. Phoenix, the mythical bird that rose from its own ashes. And now, nearly 3 decades later, Maple was trying to prevent another fiery spirit from being extinguished. As the day progressed, Emma noticed something remarkable. Word about Spirit and Maple had spread beyond the ranch, and people began to arrive. Neighbors, friends, even strangers who had heard the story through the community grapevine. They came with offers of help, with special herbs and supplements, with stories of their own animals who had overcome impossible odds. Sarah set up a small table near the stable entrance, offering coffee and the homemade cookies she was famous for throughout the county. The atmosphere took on an almost festive quality, a gathering of hope centered around the unlikely pair in stall number 7. Late in the afternoon, Emma was surprised to see Garrett Miller's truck pull up. The young veterinary student had worked at Silver Creek 2 summers ago before returning to university. He approached Emma with a shy smile, his lanky frame seeming even taller than she remembered. Dr. Rodriguez called me, he explained. Thought I might be interested in the case. I'm specializing in equine immunology. Emma felt a surge of gratitude toward the older veterinarian. He didn't mention he was bringing in reinforcements. Garrett's cheeks colored slightly. Not exactly reinforcements. More like an extra pair of hands and eyes. Dr. Rodriguez knows I've been researching similar cases for my thesis. He followed Emma to Spirit's stall, where the foal was now standing on his own, though still pressed close to Maple's side for security. Remarkable, Garrett murmured, observing the pair. The bond between them is incredible. And you say she's not related to him at all? Not by blood, Emma replied, but in every other way that matters. Garrett nodded, understanding. Mind if I take some notes for my research? This kind of interspecies caregiving behavior is fascinating from a behavioral science perspective. Emma agreed, and soon Garrett was settled on a hay bale, his notebook open as he documented the interactions between Maple and Spirit. His presence was unobtrusive, his genuine interest in the horse's welfare evident in every question he asked. As evening approached, Dr. Rodriguez returned as promised. He and Garrett conferred quietly, their heads bent over test results and treatment protocols. Emma watched them, a flicker of hope kindling in her chest at the serious, determined expressions on both men's faces. "We're adjusting his medication slightly," Dr. Rodriguez explained afterward. "Garrett has some promising ideas based on recent research. It's still experimental, but at this point I think it's worth trying." The modified treatment began that night. Emma, despite her father's protests, insisted on staying in the stable again. To her surprise, Garrett volunteered to take the first watch, allowing her to get a few hours of uninterrupted sleep. "I'll wake you if anything changes," he promised. "But you need rest, Emma. You can't help Spirit if you collapse from exhaustion." His concern was genuine, and Emma found herself too tired to argue. She retreated to her makeshift bed, watching through heavy-lidded eyes as Garrett settled on the stool beside Spirit's stall, his notebook open and a gentle smile on his face as he observed Maple guiding the foal to lie down for the night. Just before sleep claimed her, Emma's last thought was of her mother naming a doomed foal Phoenix, never knowing that nearly 30 years later, that fiery spirit might find a second chance at life through another. Some connections, she reflected drowsily, transcended time and understanding, weaving through lives in patterns too complex for humans to fully comprehend. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, drumming softly on the stable roof. Inside, an old mare stood guard over a young foal, both bathed in the soft glow of a lantern, as two healers, one seasoned, one still learning, worked together to give them a fighting chance. Dawn broke with tentative promise, pink gold light spilling through the stable windows. Emma awoke with a start, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She'd slept longer than intended. The sun was already well above the horizon. Sitting up quickly, she looked toward Spirit's stall. Garrett was still there, his tall frame hunched on the small stool, making notes in his journal. Beside him, Miguel had arrived with fresh water and hay, speaking quietly in Spanish to the horses as he worked. "Good morning," Garrett said, noticing Emma was awake. His voice held a note of cautious optimism. He had a good night, even took a few steps on his own around 3 a.m. Emma scrambled to her feet, smoothing her rumpled clothes. "Why didn't you wake me?" "You needed the rest," Garrett replied simply, "and everything was under control. Maple made sure of that." Emma approached the stall, her heart lifting at what she saw. Spirit was standing, his legs still a bit unsteady but supporting his weight. More remarkably, he was nursing, not from a bottle but from Maple. Is that normal?" Emma asked, watching as the foal suckled eagerly at the elderly mare's udder. Garrett shook his head in amazement. "Not at all. Maple shouldn't be producing milk at her age. But Dr. Rodriguez warned me this might happen. It's rare but documented, a phenomenon called induced lactation. Sometimes when a mare forms a strong enough bond with an orphaned foal, her body can actually begin producing milk again, even years after her last pregnancy. But Spirit isn't orphaned," Emma pointed out. "Aurora is just next door." "In Maple's mind, he might as well be," Garrett said. "She's completely adopted him. The maternal behaviors she's displaying have triggered physiological changes. Dr. Rodriguez says it probably won't be enough milk to sustain him fully, but any amount will help him recover." Emma watched the miracle unfolding before her with a sense of wonder. Maple's silvery coat gleamed in the morning light as she stood patiently, allowing Spirit to draw nourishment from her ancient body. The bond between them seemed to strengthen with each passing hour, defying explanation yet impossible to deny. After breakfast, brought as usual by Sarah, Emma was surprised to see her father enter the stable carrying a dusty cardboard box. "Found these in the attic," he said, setting the box down on a hay bale. "Thought you might want to see them." Inside were dozens of old photographs, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Caroline Parker's neat handwriting labeled each one with dates and names. James pulled out a small album bound in faded blue fabric. "These are from the year Maple had her foal," he explained, opening the album. Emma sat beside her father, turning the pages slowly. There was Maple, her coat a rich chestnut without a trace of silver, proudly carrying a young James and Caroline on trail rides. Then photos of her growing pregnancy, her sides swelling with new life. And finally the foal himself, Phoenix. Emma's breath caught as she studied the image. The resemblance to Spirit was uncanny. The same copper coat, the same white blaze running down his face, even the same determined set to his small head. "It's like seeing the same horse," she murmured. No wonder Maple responded the way she did. James nodded, his finger tracing the outline of the long-lost foal. When Phoenix died, Maple changed, became more solitary, less interested in people or other horses. Your mother was the only one she would still connect with. After Caroline passed, he trailed off, his voice growing rough. Well, Maple retreated even further, almost like she understood grief, knew what it was to lose someone irreplaceable. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, both for the mother she still missed and for the silent suffering Maple had endured all these years. And now she has a second chance. "They both do," her father said softly. Later that morning, Dr. Rodriguez arrived for his daily checkup, eyebrows rising in surprise when Garrett informed him about Maple's milk production. "Fascinating," he said, examining both horses carefully. "And the milk seems to be agreeing with him. His vital signs are the best they've been since he fell ill." The positive report spread quickly through the ranch. By afternoon, the parade of visitors had resumed, each person bringing something to contribute. Special grain mixtures for Maple to keep her strength up, handmade blankets for Spirit, even a carefully carved wooden plaque reading "Maple and Spirit" that Miguel hung above the stall door. Emma was touched by the outpouring of support, but more than that, she was struck by how the story of the elderly mare and the sick foal seemed to resonate with everyone who heard it. There was something universal in their bond, something that spoke to the human heart about hope, second chances, and the healing power of connection. Garrett stayed through the day, his thesis research temporarily forgotten, as he found himself drawn into the community effort to save Spirit. Emma noticed how easily he fit in, his quiet competence and genuine care for the animals earning respect from everyone at Silver Creek. "You're good at this," she told him as they prepared Spirit's evening medications together. "The horses trust you." Garrett smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Animals know when you see them, really see them, not just as cases or specimens. My professors keep telling me I need more clinical detachment, but that's not why you wanted to be a vet," Emma finished for him. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding before Garrett looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyway, Spirit's progress is remarkable. The new medication protocol seems to be working. His immune system is starting to regulate itself." As evening approached, Emma noticed Spirit becoming restless. The foal paced in small circles, occasionally stumbling, his breathing growing more labored. Maple sensed his distress, positioning herself to support him, but even her presence didn't seem to calm him completely. "Something's wrong," Emma said, the fear she'd been holding at bay rushing back. Garrett immediately moved to examine the foal, his hands gentle but thorough as they checked vital signs. His expression grew serious. "His temperature's rising again. Could be a reaction to the medication or a secondary infection taking hold." "Should we call Dr. Rodriguez?" Emma asked, already reaching for her phone. "Yes, but first we need to cool him down." Garrett grabbed a bucket of water and clean cloths. "Help me get these wet compresses on his pressure points." They worked together, applying cool cloths to Spirit's neck, chest, and the insides of his legs. Maple watched anxiously, nickering softly to the foal. When Emma stepped back to call Dr. Rodriguez, the old mare moved closer, positioning her body so that her breath blew directly onto Spirit's face, a technique mother horses use to comfort their foals. Dr. Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, bringing additional medications and portable monitoring equipment. The next hour passed in tense activity as they fought to bring Spirit's fever under control. "I thought we were past the worst of it," Emma said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and worry. "Why is this happening?" "Recovery isn't linear," Dr. Rodriguez explained gently as he adjusted an IV drip. "Especially with immune disorders. There are good days and bad days. The important thing is that we caught this setback early." As midnight approached, Spirit's temperature finally began to drop. The crisis wasn't over, but the immediate danger had passed. Emma leaned against the stall door, physically and emotionally drained. "Get some rest," Garrett urged. "I'll stay with him tonight." Emma started to protest, but the determined look in Garrett's eyes stopped her. She nodded gratefully and retreated to her makeshift bed, falling into an exhausted sleep almost immediately. In her dreams, she saw Phoenix running through sunlit fields, his copper coat gleaming, and beside him, Spirit, healthy and strong, both foals watched over by a majestic mare whose coat shifted between silver and chestnut with each change of the light. Emma woke to the sound of quiet conversation. Garrett and Dr. Rodriguez were standing near Spirit's stall, speaking in low tones as early morning light filtered through the stable windows. She rose quickly, heart pounding with apprehension. "How is he?" she asked, approaching the two men. Dr. Rodriguez turned, his face showing cautious relief. "Better. The fever broke around 3 a.m., and he's been stable since then." He gestured toward the stall. "See for yourself." Emma peered inside. Spirit was standing, wobbly but upright, nursing once again from Maple. The old mare's eyes were half closed in what looked like contentment as she provided nourishment to her adopted foal. "The fact that he's nursing is an excellent sign," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "His appetite returning means his body is focusing on healing rather than just surviving." Garrett rubbed his reddened eyes, clearly having stayed awake through the night. "Maple hasn't left his side, not for a minute. Even when he was at his worst, she kept positioning herself so he could lean against her for support." Emma felt a rush of gratitude toward the veterinary student. "Thank you for staying with them." Garrett shrugged, but his tired smile showed that her thanks meant something to him. "I wouldn't have missed it. What we're witnessing here is extraordinary from both a medical and behavioral perspective." Dr. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "I've been in contact with colleagues at several veterinary schools. None of them have documented a case quite like this, an elderly mare with no recent pregnancies producing milk for an unrelated foal. It's extremely rare." "Does that mean Spirit will recover completely?" Emma asked, hope rising in her chest. The veterinarian's expression grew more measured. "His latest blood work shows improvement, but the type of immune disorder he has tends to be chronic. He may always be more vulnerable to illness than other horses." He glanced at Spirit with thoughtful eyes. "But with proper management, there's no reason he can't live a good life." After the veterinarian left, Emma and Garrett worked together to clean Spirit's stall, refresh his water, and prepare Maple's special feed, now enhanced with supplements to support her milk production. Their movements around each other had developed an easy rhythm, as if they'd been working side by side for years rather than days. "You never did tell me why you decided to specialize in equine immunology," Emma said, as they filled water buckets at the outdoor pump. Garrett's hands stilled momentarily. "My sister had an autoimmune disease," he replied quietly. "Not the same as what Spirit has, of course, but watching her deal with it made me interested in how immune systems can malfunction, attacking the very bodies they're meant to protect." He resumed pumping water. She had a therapy horse, a gentle old gelding named Cooper. He seemed to understand her bad days, always adjusting his pace and energy to match what she could handle. Emma absorbed this information, seeing Garrett in a new light. "Is your sister—" "She's doing well now," he assured her quickly. "In remission for 3 years. But Cooper showed me how animals can be part of the healing process in ways we don't fully understand." He nodded toward the stable. "Like Maple with Spirit." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah, who brought not only breakfast but news that made Emma's heart sink. "Your father just got a call from the Westbrook stables," Sarah said, setting down a basket of still warm muffins. "They're still expecting Aurora for breeding next week. Apparently the stud fee is non-refundable and they're not willing to reschedule." Emma had completely forgotten about the arranged breeding. Aurora, Spirit's mother, was supposed to be transported to Westbrook stables to be bred to their champion stallion, a plan made months before Spirit's birth and subsequent illness. "But we can't separate them now," Emma protested. "Spirit still needs his mother nearby, even if Maple is doing most of the caregiving." Sarah sighed. "Your father explained the situation, but they were quite firm. The stallion is booked solid for months, and this is our only slot." The breeding was important for the ranch's financial future. The resulting foal could be valuable, especially if it inherited the stallion's award-winning conformation and Aurora's speed. But the timing couldn't have been worse. "What are we going to do?" Emma asked, looking toward the stalls where Aurora nickered softly to her son from across the aisle. Garrett considered the problem thoughtfully. "Spirit is improving, and he is getting most of his nourishment from Maple now." He frowned, thinking, but the stress of separation could be a setback. Ideally, we'd wait another week at least. Throughout the morning, the dilemma weighed heavily on Emma's mind. Her father was sympathetic but practical when she discussed it with him. "We've invested a lot in this breeding," James said. "The stud fee alone was nearly all our profit from last quarter. If we miss this opportunity, it puts the ranch in a difficult position." Emma understood the financial realities of running Silver Creek. The ranch had been struggling in recent years, with rising costs and increasing competition from larger operations. This breeding represented a chance to produce a foal that could elevate their reputation and bring in much-needed income. "Maybe Aurora could travel with Spirit," she suggested, knowing even as she spoke that it was impractical. "Or we could bring the stallion here." James shook his head. "Westbrook would never agree to that. Their stallion doesn't leave their property, too valuable and too much liability." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the stable. Emma and her father hurried inside to find Garrett kneeling beside Spirit, who had collapsed on the straw, his breathing labored once again. "What happened?" Emma gasped, dropping to her knees beside them. Garrett's face was tense with concern. He seemed fine, then suddenly his legs gave out. Could be muscle weakness from the medications, or his body is just exhausted from fighting. Maple had positioned herself protectively over the foal, her large body creating a barrier between Spirit and the perceived threat of too many humans crowding him. Her ears were pinned back, a clear warning to give them space. James backed away, respecting the mare's signal. "I'll call Dr. Rodriguez," he said, pulling out his phone. Emma stayed where she was, speaking softly to Maple. "It's okay, girl. We're trying to help him. We're all on the same side." Gradually, Maple's ears moved forward again. She shifted position, allowing Emma and Garrett closer access to Spirit while maintaining her vigilant presence. Garrett checked the foal's vital signs with practiced hands. His heart rate is elevated, but his temperature seems normal. He looked up at Emma, his expression serious. "This might be our answer about Aurora. Spirit clearly isn't stable enough for any major changes right now." The stress of having his mother removed could be devastating. When Dr. Rodriguez arrived 30 minutes later, his examination confirmed Garrett's assessment. Spirit was experiencing a relapse, not as severe as before, but significant enough to be concerning. "I don't think it's directly related to the immune disorder," he explained. "More likely it's overall weakness and exhaustion. His body has been through a tremendous fight." Emma looked to her father, knowing the difficult position he was in. James stood silent for a long moment, watching as Maple continued her unwavering guardianship of the struggling foal. Finally, he sighed. "I'll call Westbrook," he said. "Tell them we need to cancel. Spirit comes first." Relief flooded Emma, though she understood the financial sacrifice this decision represented. "Thank you, Dad." James nodded, his weathered face showing a mixture of resignation and determination. "Some things matter more than money. Your mother taught me that." He glanced at Maple. "Besides, that old girl wouldn't forgive me if I did anything to harm her baby." As James left to make the call, Emma noticed Garrett watching her with a new respect in his eyes. She realized that in this moment, Silver Creek Ranch had revealed its true character. Not just a business, but a family, where bonds of love and loyalty still outweighed the bottom line. The following days unfolded in a pattern of cautious progress. Spirit recovered from his collapse, regaining strength gradually. Emma noticed subtle changes. His eyes brighter, his movements more coordinated, his appetite steadier. Still, Dr. Rodriguez cautioned against overconfidence. "He's not out of the woods yet," the veterinarian reminded them during his daily visit. "This condition can wax and wane. We need to stay vigilant." Maple remained constant, her devotion unwavering. What had seemed miraculous in those first desperate days had now become their normal. The elderly mare producing milk for the foal, guiding his wobbly steps, standing guard as he slept. Emma sometimes found herself wondering if Maple slept at all, though Garrett assured her that horses could rest standing up, sleeping in brief intervals while remaining alert to their surroundings. "It's evolutionary," he explained one evening as they shared a simple dinner of sandwiches outside the stable. "Prey animals need to be ready to flee at a moment's notice." Emma smiled. "You sound like a textbook." Garrett laughed, a warm sound that had become increasingly familiar. "Hazard of being in school too long. I tend to lecture when I'm nervous." "What are you nervous about?" Emma asked, curious. His eyes met hers briefly before looking away. "Nothing specific, just life, I guess. The future." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Emma found herself thinking about Garrett's words later that night as she prepared for bed in the small cabin her father had built years ago as guest quarters. She'd finally been persuaded to stop sleeping in the stable now that Spirit was more stable, though she still spent most of her waking hours there. The cabin, nestled among pine trees a short walk from the main house, had become her private refuge after graduating high school. Its rustic simplicity suited her, a single room with a wood stove, a narrow bed, a bookshelf filled with veterinary texts and horse training manuals, and windows that framed the mountains rising beyond Silver Creek's boundaries. Emma sat on her bed, brushing her hair and contemplating the changes the past week had brought. Spirit's illness had been a crisis, but it had also brought unexpected gifts: a deepened appreciation for Maple, a renewed sense of purpose in Garrett's presence which she found herself valuing more than she would have anticipated. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She opened it to find her father standing there, his expression serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. Emma nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. James settled into the room's only chair while Emma sat on the edge of her bed, a flicker of worry rising in her chest. "I got the numbers back from our accountant," James began without preamble. "Canceling Aurora's breeding is going to hit us harder than I thought. The stud fee was non-refundable as we knew, but there are additional penalties in the contract. Emma's stomach tightened. How bad is it? Her father sighed, running a hand through his gray-streaked hair. Bad enough that we'll need to make some changes. Cut back on expenses, maybe sell a couple of the yearlings earlier than planned. I'm sorry, Dad, Emma said, guilt washing over her. If I hadn't insisted on keeping Aurora here for Spirit, James shook his head firmly. You did the right thing. I would have made the same choice. His weathered face softened. This ranch has weathered tough times before. We'll get through this too. After her father left, Emma lay awake for hours, her mind churning with worry. Silver Creek had been in her family for 3 generations. The thought of financial trouble threatening its future filled her with dread. Morning brought no easy answers, but Emma forced herself to focus on the present as she headed to the stable. Spirit greeted her with a soft, nickering sound that lifted her spirits immediately. The foal was standing steadily, his eyes bright with recognition. Well, look at you, Emma said, entering the stall to run her hands over his small body. His coat felt smoother, the heat of fever completely gone. You're looking more like a proper horse every day. Maple watched from nearby, her vigilance never faltering, even as Spirit's condition improved. Emma noticed that the mare's own body had begun to show the effects of her extraordinary efforts, her ribs more prominent, her once lustrous coat a bit duller. The metabolic demands of producing milk at her advanced age were taking a toll. We need to take better care of you, Emma told Maple, stroking her neck. You've given so much. Garrett arrived mid-morning, bringing specialized feed supplements he'd convinced one of his professors to provide. It's a new formulation designed for geriatric brood mares, he explained as he mixed it into Maple's grain. Should help support her milk production without depleting her own reserves too much. Emma watched him work, grateful for his continued involvement despite having no official role at the ranch. Don't you need to get back to school? Garrett shrugged. I've arranged to complete this semester's clinical hours here. My advisor was actually quite supportive once I explained the situation with Spirit and Maple. Said it was a unique learning opportunity. He glanced at her. That is, if it's okay with you and your father. Of course it is, Emma said quickly, perhaps too quickly based on the smile that flickered across Garrett's face. As the day progressed, Emma noticed Spirit venturing farther from Maple's side, exploring his stall with increasing confidence. The mare allowed these small excursions but kept a watchful eye, immediately moving closer if the foal showed any sign of distress. It's like watching a mother with a toddler learning to walk, Sarah commented when she brought lunch. She wants him to be independent but can't help hovering. Emma laughed. I never thought I'd see Maple as a helicopter parent, but here we are. In the afternoon, Dr. Rodriguez arrived for his daily checkup, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman in her 50s, whom he introduced as Dr. Eleanor Winters, a specialist in equine behavior from the university. I hope you don't mind, Dr. Rodriguez said. When I told Eleanor about Maple and Spirit, she was fascinated. This kind of cross-generational adoption with induced lactation is extremely rare. Dr. Winters observed the pair for nearly an hour, taking notes and occasionally asking questions about Maple's history and Spirit's illness. Her keen eyes missed nothing. The way Maple positioned herself between Spirit and visitors, the specific vocalizations she used when communicating with the foal, the apparent teaching behaviors as she guided his movements. In 40 years of studying horses, I've only documented 2 other cases remotely similar to this, Dr. Winters told them afterward. Both involved younger mares who had recently lost foals, not an elderly horse with no recent pregnancies. Is it harmful for Maple? Emma asked, voicing the concern that had been growing as she watched the older mare's condition. Dr. Winters considered the question carefully. It's certainly taxing her physically. Milk production requires significant energy and resources. But emotionally, she shook her head in wonder. I believe this relationship is profoundly beneficial for her. She's found purpose, connection. Those things matter to horses just as they do to humans. As the specialist prepared to leave, Dr. Winters turned to Emma with an unexpected request. Would you consider allowing me to document this case for a research journal? With proper credit to your family and the ranch, of course. Emma glanced at Garrett, who nodded encouragingly. I think it would be valuable, he said. What we're learning here could help other horses someday. Then yes, Emma agreed, as long as it doesn't disturb them. As she watched the two veterinarians drive away, Emma felt a curious mixture of pride and protectiveness. Spirit's struggle and Maple's devotion had transcended the boundaries of their small ranch, becoming something worthy of scientific documentation. Yet at its heart, their story remained intensely personal, a testament to the depth of connection possible between living beings, even across the boundaries of age, species, and blood relation. 2 weeks after Spirit's initial collapse, the spring sun shone with renewed warmth over Silver Creek Ranch. Emma stood at the paddock fence watching as Spirit took his first steps outdoors since falling ill. The foal moved with growing confidence, his copper coat gleaming in the sunlight as he explored the small enclosure. Maple followed close behind, her silvery form a constant shadow to the energetic young horse. Though she still maintained her vigilant watch, Emma noticed subtle changes in the mare's behavior, a willingness to allow Spirit slightly more independence, a relaxing of the hyper-alert posture she'd maintained during the worst of his illness. He looks like a different horse, Garrett commented, coming to stand beside Emma at the fence. He'd become a fixture at the ranch, seamlessly integrating into their daily routines, as if he'd always been part of Silver Creek. Emma nodded, unable to suppress her smile. Dr. Rodriguez says his latest blood work is almost normal. The immune markers are still elevated, but nothing like before. They watched as Spirit attempted a playful buck, his small hooves barely leaving the ground in what would someday become the powerful kick of an adult horse. The effort seemed to surprise him, and he stumbled slightly before regaining his balance. Maple was at his side instantly, steadying him with her larger body. She's still not taking any chances, Emma observed. Can you blame her? Garrett replied. After coming so close to losing him, I think she'll be overprotective for a long time. The comment hung in the air between them, carrying unspoken weight. Emma found herself wondering if Garrett was thinking of his sister, who had faced her own life-threatening illness. There was something in his expression, a softness, a vulnerability, that suggested personal understanding of what it meant to watch someone you love fight for survival. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by the approach of James, his boots kicking up dust as he crossed the yard from the main house. His face carried the same worried expression Emma had noticed increasingly often since their conversation about the ranch's finances. Got a call from Bill Henderson, he announced without preamble. He's interested in buying that piece of land along the East Ridge. Emma turned in surprise. The East Ridge property was 20 acres of prime grazing land that had been part of Silver Creek since her grandfather's time. You're not considering selling it, are you? James sighed, leaning against the fence rail. We need to consider all options, Em. The penalties from the breeding contract hit our cash reserves hard, and property taxes are due next month. The reality of their situation settled heavily on Emma's shoulders. Silver Creek had always operated on tight margins, but this was different. This was land that had been in her family for generations. There must be another way, she said, struggling to keep her voice even. Her father's expression softened. I'm open to suggestions, but we need to be practical. After James walked away, a heavy silence fell between Emma and Garrett. She could feel him watching her, waiting for her to speak first. "I can't believe he's even considering selling part of the ranch," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett hesitated before responding. "It's hard to make small ranches work these days. My parents face similar challenges with their place in Montana." Emma looked at him sharply. "You never mentioned your family had a ranch." "Had being the operative word," Garrett replied with a grimace. "They sold it 3 years ago. Couldn't compete with the corporate operations moving in." He turned to face her directly. "I don't say that to discourage you, just I understand what you're going through." The personal revelation shifted something between them. Emma had viewed Garrett primarily as a veterinary student with a professional interest in Spirit's case. Now she saw him as someone who understood her world in a way few others could. "What happened after they sold?" she asked. "They bought a smaller place, just enough for my dad's favorite horses and my mom's garden. It was hard at first letting go of the dream, but they're happier now in some ways, less pressure." Emma tried to imagine Silver Creek reduced to a hobby farm, her father's lifetime of work condensed to a few acres and a handful of horses. The thought made her chest ache. Their conversation was interrupted by Spirit's soft nickering. The foal had approached the fence, his curiosity seemingly piqued by the two humans deep in conversation. Maple remained a few steps behind, watchful but allowing his exploration. "Hey there, Miracle Boy," Emma said, reaching out to stroke his velvety muzzle. The foal leaned into her touch, his dark eyes bright with a vitality that had been absent during his illness. Garrett smiled, the concern of moments before replaced by genuine joy at Spirit's progress. "He's really something special, isn't he?" "They both are," Emma replied, looking past Spirit to where Maple stood. The elderly mare's dedication had transcended normal animal behavior, becoming something profound that Emma couldn't fully articulate but felt deeply in her heart. As the day progressed, Emma found herself watching the interactions between Spirit and Maple with new attention, seeing parallels to her own life. The young foal was gaining independence daily, testing boundaries while still relying on Maple's wisdom and protection. Emma, too, was caught in that space between independence and connection, to her father, to the ranch, to the legacy she had always assumed would be hers to continue. That evening, after finishing the day's chores, Emma found Garrett sitting on the porch of the main house, laptop open as he made notes about Spirit's progress. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, painting the buildings in golden light. "I've been thinking," Garrett said as she settled beside him, "about your financial situation." Emma stiffened slightly, pride warring with practicality. "It's not your problem to solve." "Maybe not," he conceded, "but I have an idea that might help." He turned the laptop toward her, showing a web page for a university research grant. "Dr. Winters is quite influential in the equine research community. With her backing, we could apply for funding to study Maple and Spirit's case formally. The grant would provide stipends for caretaking, medical expenses, even facility improvements." Emma scanned the page, hope flickering to life. "You think we'd qualify?" "What's happening here is scientifically significant," Garrett said earnestly. "Induced lactation in a geriatric mare, cross-generational bonding, the impact on recovery from an immune disorder. It checks all the boxes for novel research." His expression grew more animated as he continued. "Plus, the application deadline isn't for 2 weeks. We have time to put together a strong proposal." For the first time since learning of the ranch's financial troubles, Emma felt a glimmer of optimism. This approach wouldn't solve everything, but it might buy them enough time to find more permanent solutions. "We'd need Dad's approval," she said, already mentally composing the pitch to her father. Garrett's smile widened at her use of "we." "Of course, and Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Winters would need to be formally involved, but I think they'd be on board." As they sat together refining the idea, the soft sounds of horses drifted from the nearby paddock. Emma glanced over to see Maple and Spirit, silhouetted against the sunset, their contrasting forms, one silver with age, one copper with youth, creating a picture of perfect harmony. In that moment, it struck her that Spirit and Maple's extraordinary bond might not only have saved the foal's life, but could now be the key to preserving Silver Creek Ranch itself. There was a poetry to it that felt right, as if the pieces of a larger pattern were falling into place. The research grant proposal quickly became the center of activity at Silver Creek Ranch. James had embraced the idea with cautious optimism, his weathered face showing the first genuine smile Emma had seen in weeks when Garrett explained the potential funding. "It won't solve everything," he'd acknowledged, "but it could give us breathing room to figure out a long-term plan." Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Winters had enthusiastically agreed to participate, recognizing the scientific value of documenting Maple and Spirit's extraordinary case. Emma found herself immersed in a crash course on academic grant writing, spending evenings at the kitchen table with Garrett as they crafted language that would convey the significance of what was happening at their small ranch. "The key is to emphasize the broader implications," Garrett explained, his fingers flying over his laptop keyboard, "how understanding this bond could potentially impact treatment protocols for immunocompromised foals elsewhere." Emma nodded, taking notes. "And the induced lactation in a geriatric mare, that's essentially unheard of in the literature, right?" "Exactly. Dr. Winters has only found 3 documented cases worldwide, none with Maple's age profile." Garrett paused, giving her an appreciative glance. "You're getting good at this, you know." Emma felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the grant proposal spread through her chest. These evening work sessions had become something she looked forward to, not just for the hope they represented for Silver Creek's future, but for the easy companionship she and Garrett had developed. Meanwhile, Spirit continued to improve, his progress now measured in playful bucks and short gallops around the paddock, rather than simply standing without assistance. The foal's personality emerged more clearly with each passing day, curious, determined, with flashes of mischief that sometimes tested Maple's patience. Emma watched one morning as Spirit darted away from Maple to investigate a butterfly, venturing to the far corner of the paddock. The mare followed at a dignified pace, her ears forward as she monitored his exploration. When Spirit suddenly spooked at a plastic bag blown against the fence, Maple was beside him instantly, her large body positioning itself between the perceived threat and her charge. "She's still not taking any chances with him," Emma observed to Miguel, who was replacing a broken fence post nearby. The older man nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My grandmother used to say that once a heart knows true fear of loss, it never forgets." He tapped his chest. "The body remembers, even when the danger is past." The wisdom of those words stayed with Emma throughout the day. Maple had lost her foal once, nearly 30 years ago. That experience had shaped her, creating both a wound and, eventually, the capacity for the extraordinary devotion she now showed Spirit. That afternoon, Dr. Rodriguez arrived for his bi-weekly checkup, accompanied by a film crew from the university's media department. The grant application had generated enough interest that Dr. Winters had arranged for professional documentation of Spirit and Maple's case. "We'll be as unobtrusive as possible," the young woman directing the crew assured Emma. "Just pretend we're not here." Easier said than done, Emma thought as cameras recorded Spirit's examination. The foal seemed unfazed by the attention, but Maple watched the proceedings with evident suspicion, her ears flicking back and forth as she tracked each movement of the strangers. "Her protective instincts are still in high gear," Dr. Rodriguez noted as he completed his examination of Spirit. "But the good news is that our patient here is continuing to improve. His blood work is almost within normal parameters, and his growth rate has accelerated to match what we'd expect for a foal his age. The positive report was another weight lifted from Emma's shoulders. With each passing day, the terrifying crisis of Spirit's illness receded further into memory. Yet she found herself watchful, aware that Maple's vigilance contained wisdom she would do well to emulate. As the film crew packed up their equipment, Emma noticed Maple seemed unusually tired, her head hanging lower than normal. Concerned, she entered the paddock to check on the mare. "Hey, old girl," she said softly, running her hands along Maple's neck. "You feeling okay?" Maple's skin twitched under Emma's touch, and she noticed the mare's coat lacked its usual luster. When she pressed gently along Maple's side, the horse shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Rodriguez," Emma called, worry sharpening her voice. "Could you take a look at Maple before you go?" The veterinarian returned, his expression growing serious as he examined the elderly mare. "Her temperature's elevated," he reported, "and she's showing signs of discomfort in her abdomen. Could be the beginning of colic or possibly mastitis from the milk production." Emma's heart sank. Colic could be dangerous for any horse, but in one of Maple's advanced age, it could be life-threatening. And mastitis, inflammation of the mammary tissues, was a common complication in nursing mares that could become serious if untreated. "We need to start treatment immediately," Dr. Rodriguez said, already reaching for his medical bag. "I'll give her anti-inflammatories and antibiotics as a precaution, but she'll need careful monitoring." As the veterinarian administered the injections, Emma found herself fighting tears. The thought of Maple falling ill after everything she'd done for Spirit seemed profoundly unfair. The mare had given so much of herself, her energy, her milk, her constant attention. Had it finally become too much for her aging body? Spirit seemed to sense something was wrong. The foal hovered nearby, occasionally touching his muzzle to Maple's flank as if checking on her. His concern was so evident that even Dr. Rodriguez remarked on it. "The bond goes both ways," he observed. "She's been his protector, but he clearly cares for her too." After the veterinarian left, Emma remained in the paddock, sitting on a hay bale as she watched Maple. The mare had settled somewhat after the medication, but still seemed uncomfortable, shifting her weight and occasionally looking back at her flanks, a classic sign of abdominal pain in horses. Garrett found her there at dusk, her face etched with worry. Without a word, he sat beside her, his shoulder touching hers in silent support. "Dr. Rodriguez called me," he said after a moment. "I've adjusted my schedule to stay overnight and monitor her." Emma turned to him, gratitude welling up alongside a more complex emotion she wasn't ready to name. "You don't have to do that. You've already done so much." Garrett's eyes met hers, serious and sincere. "I want to be here, for Maple, for Spirit." He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. "For you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Emma found herself unable to look away from his face, seeing there a reflection of her own complicated feelings. Professional respect that had evolved into friendship and now seemed to be transforming into something deeper. Before she could respond, Spirit approached, nickering softly as he nudged Garrett's arm. The moment broken, they both turned their attention to the foal, who seemed distressed by Maple's condition. "He knows something's wrong," Emma said. Garrett nodded, reaching out to stroke Spirit's neck. "Animals understand more than we give them credit for, especially when it comes to those they care about." As darkness fell over Silver Creek Ranch, the four of them remained together in the paddock, two humans and two horses connected by bonds of concern and care that transcended the usual boundaries between species. And in that moment of shared worry, Emma realized that whatever happened next, none of them would face it alone. Dawn broke over Silver Creek Ranch with gentle fingers of light that found Emma still in the paddock, curled under a blanket Garrett had brought from the house. She awoke with a start, immediately looking for Maple. The mare stood nearby, her posture more relaxed than the previous evening, Spirit dozing against her flank. "Her temperature's normal," Garrett reported softly, appearing beside Emma with a steaming mug of coffee, "and she ate a little hay around 4 a.m. Dr. Rodriguez was right. Probably a mild case of colic. The medication seems to have done its job." Relief washed over Emma as she accepted the coffee, her fingers brushing against Garrett's in the exchange. "You stayed out here all night?" He nodded, settling beside her on the hay bale. "Wanted to check her vitals hourly. Besides," he added with a small smile, "the company wasn't bad." The quiet admission hung in the morning air, simple yet profound. Emma found herself leaning slightly against his shoulder, the gesture speaking volumes that words couldn't yet articulate. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Maple recovered fully, her maternal devotion to Spirit undiminished despite her brief illness. The grant proposal was submitted ahead of schedule, bolstered by strong letters of support from Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Winters, and several faculty members from the veterinary school impressed by the documentation of Spirit's case. Spirit himself thrived, growing stronger and more coordinated with each passing day. His copper coat gleamed with health, and his eyes held the bright curiosity that had been temporarily dimmed during his illness. He was still dependent on Maple's milk, though Dr. Rodriguez noted he would soon be ready to transition fully to solid food. The bond between them will remain long after the physical need is gone, the veterinarian observed during one of his visits. What Maple has given him goes far beyond nutrition. On a warm afternoon in late spring, Emma stood at the fence of the larger pasture, watching as Spirit explored this expanded territory for the first time. Maple followed at a short distance, giving him freedom while remaining vigilant. The contrast between her silver coat and his vibrant copper created a picture that caught at Emma's heart. Age and youth, wisdom and exuberance, protection and adventure. "Beautiful, aren't they?" came her father's voice as he joined her at the fence. Emma nodded, unable to find adequate words for the scene before them. After a moment, she asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Have you heard anything from Bill Henderson about the East Ridge land?" James's weathered face relaxed into a smile. "Told him it's not for sale. At least not yet." Emma turned to him in surprise. "What changed your mind?" "Got a call from the university this morning," her father replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The grant committee was apparently so impressed by the preliminary documentation that they've approved an emergency funding advance. Not the full amount, but enough to cover our immediate needs." Joy bubbled up in Emma's chest. "That's incredible news." "There's more," James continued. "Dr. Winters has arranged for Maple and Spirit's story to be featured in an upcoming PBS documentary about animal bonds. They're paying for access to film here over the summer." Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. The tide had turned so quickly, transforming their financial crisis into unexpected opportunity. "It seems our old girl and her adopted son have become celebrities," James said, nodding toward Maple and Spirit. "Who would have thought?" As if sensing they were being discussed, Maple raised her head, ears pricked toward Emma and her father. Spirit, noticing the change in his guardian's attention, trotted back to her side, still wobbly but gaining confidence with each day. "Maple saved him," Emma said softly, "and now they're saving the ranch." Her father's arm came around her shoulders, giving her a gentle squeeze. Sometimes the most unexpected gifts come from the most unexpected places. That evening, the ranch celebrated. Sarah prepared a special dinner, and even Miguel stayed late, raising a glass to Maple and Spirit's health. Dr. Rodriguez joined them, bringing news that the university was interested in establishing a more permanent research relationship with Silver Creek. "They're talking about creating a fellowship position," he told Emma as they stood on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the mountains in vibrant gold. Someone to oversee the ongoing documentation of Maple and Spirit and potentially other cases of unusual animal bonds. Emma's mind immediately went to Garrett, who had stepped away to take a phone call from his academic advisor. Would they consider a recent graduate for the position? Dr. Rodriguez smiled knowingly. They might be persuaded, especially if that graduate had first-hand experience with the case and a strong recommendation from the attending veterinarian. Before Emma could respond, Garrett returned, his expression a mixture of excitement and something that looked oddly like regret. "Everything okay?" she asked. "My advisor's thrilled about the grant progress," he said, "but she reminded me that I'm scheduled to start a residency at Colorado State's veterinary hospital next month. It was arranged last year." Emma felt her heart sink. She'd known, of course, that Garrett's presence at Silver Creek was temporary, but somehow she'd allowed herself to forget that reality as they'd worked side by side on the grant proposal, caring for Maple and Spirit, and slowly building something between them that felt increasingly significant. "Colorado's not so far," Dr. Rodriguez commented, glancing between them with understanding in his eyes. "And that fellowship position I mentioned would start in the fall, after your summer residency." Hope flickered in Garrett's expression. "You think they'd consider me?" "I think," the older veterinarian said with a smile, "that no one understands this case better than you do." With that, he excused himself, leaving Emma and Garrett alone on the porch. The setting sun bathed them in golden light as they stood in silence, the future suddenly opening before them with new possibilities. "I don't want to leave," Garrett admitted quietly. "These past weeks have been... I've never felt so connected to my work. To a place." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "To someone." Emma took a step closer to him, finding courage in the sincerity of his gaze. "Then come back, after your residency. The fellowship would be perfect for you." "And us?" he asked, the question encompassing all that had grown between them. Friendship, respect, and something deeper that neither had yet named. "We'll figure it out," Emma said with newfound confidence. "Day by day, just like we did with Spirit." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats. They turned to see Spirit cantering across the pasture, his movements growing more coordinated each day. Maple watched from nearby, her vigilance never completely abandoned, but increasingly tempered with trust in the foal's developing strength. As the last light of day gilded the land, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness settle over Silver Creek Ranch. Spirit would always carry the effects of his early illness, requiring careful management throughout his life. Maple would continue to age, her silver coat eventually yielding to the inevitable passage of time. The ranch would face future challenges, as all family businesses do. But in this moment, watching the silver mare and the copper foal against the backdrop of the land she loved, with Garrett's hand finding hers in the gathering dusk, Emma understood that some bonds transcend the fragility of life. They become part of a larger story, woven into the very fabric of a place and the hearts of those who dwell there. And that, she realized, was legacy enough for anyone,